how's it going? Welcome back to United View and welcome to the Tactical View. And for the first time in pretty much 14 months, after a big away game, it's not actually a story of how United got completely ripped apart for 90 minutes. So despite the complete head loss I saw from so many United fans on social media over the weekend last night, I don't think it was really that bad. And for me, actually, I think, as Erik ten Hag said after the game, there were a lot of positives to take away from Manchester United's defeat at the Emirates. Finished up 3-1. In all reality, it was 2-1 and then obviously a very late goal at the end when United were pushing for the equaliser. I would always personally rather push for the equaliser at the risk of conceding another one than the team just accepting the result. So what difference does it make if it finishes 2-1 versus 3-1? If we lose out at the end of the season on goal difference, honestly, it's still the right decision to do what they did yesterday and go for that extra goal to try and equalise and risk the Arsenal counter-attack as we did. But anyway, the thing I would urge everybody to do is just relax, be calm, trust the process and trust that we've had sustainable growth, because in big games away from home last season, we saw that Manchester United pretty much every time, whether it was the trip to Anfield, the terrible game at the Etihad, which looked a lot worse at half-time than it did at full-time, but was still a pretty bad performance regardless. I think throughout all of those big games, United were pretty much just hanging on from the start. There was no ability to get any control in any phase of the game, whether that's in United's own third, whether that's the middle third, whether that's the final third. And the only chances United had were counter-attacks from knockdowns, whether it's playing up to big Wout Weghorst, the previous, I don't even know what's going on with the loan signings, but we'll gloss over that bit. But the point is, last season, the performances away from home in big games were pretty terrible, no control in any phase of the game, and it was just about hanging on. Whereas, against Arsenal yesterday, there were a lot of good moments. The first phase in particular was much better, thanks to, of course, the introduction of Onana in place of David De Gea. There was a little bit missing in terms of great in our own third, okay in the final third, but it's how the ball gets from one third to the other bit that was a little bit missing. But actually, that's a lot of positives to take. In terms of the Arsenal team then, we'll come across to the board, and you'll notice, if you watch the tactical preview with James from Aftv, that it's a pretty similar lineup to what he had predicted. So a back four with Gabriel coming back in, as a lot of people thought would happen. Declan Rice sitting as the anchor because Partey was out. Havertz did start. I think James was expecting Rice in the left 8 role and Partey is the 6, but obviously with Partey injured, Rice played as the deep lying one. Saka and Martinelli on the wings, Eddie and Nketiah up top, and he did all right as well. In terms of the way that they played in the main, when Arsenal had the ball and they were building out from the back, what we tended to see was a similar sort of 3-2-5 type thing to what we've seen a lot. What was interesting was Zinchenko was not just coming into the pivot on the left side here like he did previously a lot last season. He was coming all the way over to the right side. Now, in my opinion, the reason for that is mainly due to Declan Rice here and his individual angle biases. So I think he's obviously right-footed and prefers being on this sort of left half of the pitch to give him better angles to work with, rather than coming over here where all of his play is sort of out rather than able to be progressive through the centre. So I think that was why that was happening. In terms of the front five, pretty much as expected, Martinelli and Saka pretty much as touchline wingers, Ødegaard and Havertz in the pockets. Sometimes when Zinchenko stayed as an orthodox left-back, Havertz would drop in there to help out Rice to progress the ball, but nothing too strange from Arsenal, pretty much what we expected. Out of possession from Arsenal, it was again their usual sort of shape. It sort of varied a little bit between a 4-4-2 when the ball was high up the pitch, sort of in United's third, so you'd have maybe Ødegaard going up to join Nketiah in a front two, and you'd have Rice and Havertz a little bit deeper, Saka and Martinelli on the wings. And when the ball got worked higher and higher up the pitch from a United perspective, what you'd see is Rice would drop back, Havertz would come there, Ødegaard drops in here, and you end up with more of a 4-1-4-1 or a 4-5-1. So that's the Arsenal game plan, and that, quite frankly, is enough about what Arsenal were trying to do for now. So we'll have a look at what United did and how United tried to stop them. Now, the first thing I want to point out in terms of how United coped with this game and how it actually panned out is this. So this here is an XG timeline. So this is the XG as the game went on. The yellow line here represents Manchester United and the blue line represents Arsenal. Now what you'll see is in this moment here, so at roughly 75, maybe 78 minutes just there when that shot from Arsenal happens, I think that's the big miss from Saka, potentially. I think that's probably about the right time. But up until that moment, it's pretty even right the way through. And actually, if the game finished then, you'd say just before that blue spike for Arsenal, actually United have done better on XG. So you can see from that United genuinely did compete in terms of getting shots, in terms of getting chances. Obviously the issue is what happens after that. Arsenal have this giant jump up, score 2 goals at the end of the game, and that kills it for United. But the big positive, the big encouraging thing is that at 80 minutes, United were genuinely in the game. That was supposed to be the eraser. I don't know what's gone on there. It's a disgrace and a cheat, like the refereeing and Arsenal. But yeah, 80 minutes, United were genuinely in the game, which is a massive improvement from last season where we were just hanging on and not really creating too much. Now, as we've said, the first phase was what United's pretty much biggest improvement, and the reason for that is the fantastic Andre Onana. Now, I can't believe what I'm seeing. I'm seeing criticism of Onana for his... to be honest, I don't know what, because I don't really understand what's going on in terms of the criticism. I think people are saying maybe De Gea might have saved a shot or two. Realistically, statistically, De Gea was in pretty poor shot-stopping form, but also last season, in terms of the amount of control, which was pretty much none, that United had in any big game, a major part of that was David De Gea and his inability to play out from the back. And you could see, literally from minute 1 in this game, that Andre Onana completely changed that for United. So, in the early stages, United had a lot of the ball, particularly in our own third of the pitch, and the main idea was actually pretty similar to what we tend to do generally anyway. So, United, as we've said on many a tactical view by now, under Erik ten Hag, United like to form a 3-2-5. So we'll draw Arsenal in their high press. So as we said at the start, that was more of a 4-4-2 type thing with Rice and Havertz in the pivot, Martinelli and Saka on the wings, and Nketiah and Odegaard up front. And what you tend to see from United is a back three forming in some way. So sometimes that was Casemiro dropping in with Lindelof and Martinez there. Dalot would push up somewhere, whether it's wide, whether it's a little bit narrower, and Rashford comes wide. Wan-Bissaka would push up a little bit higher as well. And what you would see generally when the ball was a little bit higher up the pitch is United building up like this. So you've got that 3 at the back, you've got 2 in midfield, which if Casemiro's rotated here, it might be Eriksen and Dalot, it might be Eriksen and Bruno. And then you've got the front 5 there of Rashford and Antony quite wide, and sometimes Wan-Bissaka and Dalot interchanging with them. So that was the idea in terms of the structure. But where Andre Onana came in here was that for large parts of the game, because of his proficiency in possession, Arsenal did not want to go and press him. So whereas with David De Gea, a team knows that you don't even have to press that hard. It's a really weird dynamic because obviously if you press De Gea, he'll make a mistake and give it straight back to you. But equally, if you just squeeze up sort of the edge of the box here with David De Gea, he wouldn't have the precision to find the ball into midfield the way Onana does. So even if you can actually just sit off him there and he'll still give the ball straight back to you. Whereas with Onana, if you press and if you go and press, he'll split you with a good pass behind. But if you're not marking him behind here, then you'll get cut through. So it was different for Arsenal in the way that they tried to play. So they were sitting here and not really engaging until the ball had come into this back 3 here to try and disconnect the influence that Onana had. So what Onana was allowing United to do was push Casemiro up there, and he would come and stand all the way up here, which meant that United essentially had an extra player, and we were able to form, instead of just a 3 versus 2, we're able to form this diamond structure here, which, if I can annotate that very quickly, that gives the pressing players a little bit of a different perspective. So, I can use straight lines for this, I think. See how nice of a diamond I can draw. There we go, that's reasonably nice if you move Lindelof there. But the idea here now is that for the Arsenal players, rather than just facing a flat line of 3 with nothing really behind them, they've now got a diamond. So if you go and press, if you go and sort of cut off the pass to Casemiro and to Martinez, really easy ball out to Lindelof. Equally, if then Nketiah anticipates a little bit early before Odegaard shuffled across, Onana can split them and pass into Casemiro. So that was the thinking, and that's how Onana enabled United to have the extra man there. And in terms of a sort of a graphic representation of what was going on, starting position there. Now, how often do you see a goalkeeper there, as Jamie Carragher would say? I haven't quite got the Scouse accent there, but you can see how far out Andre Onana is. He's genuinely basically outside of his own third. That's not a very straight line, but you can see the point I'm making here with that diamond. So you've got the 3 there, you've got Casemiro there at the pivot, so you've got many lines of different passing networks and interchanges that can happen. You've got Eriksen, who's just dropped in there and he's now rotating out. But you can see the way that disrupts Arsenal's shape, because you've got Havertz there dealing with Casemiro, but Nketiah here and Saka's gone to join the press. They can't really do anything because United have so many options. So it was Onana's proficiency there that was really important for United in our own third. And it made Arsenal basically very unwilling to press us. And it was very useful in terms of doing that. Now, to further bring home the point of Onana's influence, we have got some stats which are utterly ridiculous. So this is the ball progression from the different players on the team, both Arsenal and Manchester United. And I don't think I've ever seen this in my life before, where you've got a goalkeeper here. Like, in terms of via passing, that's very good ball progression there, that's fantastic. But even via carrying, a goalkeeper's not supposed to carry the ball that much. Onana is, well, behind, looking at the height of that, behind Saliba and Declan Rice, Onana is the third most progressive player on the pitch via carrying the ball. That is just unheard of for a goalkeeper. It is ridiculous. Now, different websites, different stats providers collect the data differently. Sometimes they exclude anything that's happened in the sort of defending third of the pitch, for example, but you get the point. Onana was ridiculous in terms of ball progression. Now, the final thing I'll say here in terms of the first phase for United is a little sequence here we've got on what Andre Onana brought, and a really nice bit of a technical aspect actually of Onana's game here. So what you can see is Arsenal are pressing. So Lindelof has just played this pass into Onana. Arsenal are pressing with a bit of a front two here, and sometimes they do this where they sit one a little bit higher and one a little bit deeper. And the idea is that Nketiah in this situation, by curving his run round, can force United into that half of the pitch. That's not a very good line. But you get the point, that half of the pitch, by him curving his run round. Now, the assumption here, and it's one that a lot of managers use in planning the way they press, is that if the striker curves their run, they can simultaneously press the person here, the goalkeeper, whilst also cutting off the passing lane to the centre-back there. What that assumption does not take into account is the technical ability of certain players. And not many players have got the ability to pull it off. But in this case, you can see Nketiah is curving that run round. You can see Havertz is pushing up high, ready to join. Ødegaard's pushing up high, ready to join. And you can see from the way they're looking that they're fixed on Lindelof there, and potentially if that ball goes wide to Wan-Bissaka, and whether Casemiro or Eriksen drop in, they're focused on setting that trap by Nketiah pushing Onana this way. They're going to set that trap for United playing that side. But what happens next? That was not quite Josh's sound effect, but it will do. You can see Nketiah still covering his run around there. And as Onana releases that ball, is he going to play straight into the Arsenal pressing trap? No, of course he's not. He's going to curve that pass round Nketiah. Martinez has made that forward run there, and you get the ball out. And you can see now that because of that, Ødegaard's having to readjust. He's gone in that way initially. He's coming across. And what that means is when you get to, I think, the fourth picture, the last picture in the sequence here, you can see that Arsenal have had to completely readjust. So from thinking that they're going to set United into a pressing trap on one side of the pitch and then be able to squeeze the whole team up and press them into a confined area to win the ball back, the Arsenal midfield have now instead had to run that way to sort of set the pressing trap. Then they've had to come all the way across the pitch as Martinez gets the ball. And as it happens, he ends up giving that ball back out to Lindelof. So that whole Arsenal team is getting shifted from side to side to side. And what you end up doing, if we go back to the main board, there we go, is, so if we get Onana back in this position here, what we've essentially done is shifted the Arsenal team one side to the other, and the effect of that in terms of giving United the ability to pass the ball forwards is that they've gone there, and obviously they all move at different speeds because they've all got different opponents to mark. By the time they then come all the way back across and go all the way back again, you start to get bigger gaps between the players. So whereas initially, if United had just passed out this side into the pressing trap, the Arsenal players are going, he's locking onto Casemiro, he's locking onto Bruno, he'll lock onto Wan-Bissaka, or he'll lock on there, or whatever way it happens, rather than being able to straight away lock on, the gaps between those Arsenal players then increases, and that increases the likelihood of United being able to find a ball through the lines to break the press and get out. Now, that was the good stuff in the first phase for United. Where things started to go a little bit less well was actually what happened in the second phase, and how we used that advantage, or rather didn't use that advantage, to then actually make anything with it. So as good as that stuff was, I think there's a little bit still missing. So in this game here against Arsenal, we saw the first phase was brilliant. Against Nottingham Forest, we saw, because they were putting no pressure on, we didn't have to use the first phase. We basically just walked the ball up to the halfway line. And then the third phase was brilliant. We were able to sustain possession, keep our attacks going wave after wave after wave, really high up the pitch. The bit that's missing is that bit in between. How do you make use of your advantage in the first phase with Onana, the centre-backs and the structure? And how do you make use of your advantage in the third phase? The only way is to find a way to link that first phase to that third phase by passing the ball through the middle of the pitch. So, in terms of that second phase then, what we've seen is this starting position in United's own third, which we've talked about already. And the issue was, how do you move the ball from sort of this area of the pitch into the bit in behind? So in terms of the way Arsenal was set up, their team was defending in a little bit of a strange way, and United weren't really able to exploit it. So what was happening was, again, as we mentioned, you've got that 3 versus 2 help with Onana helping to create it. Then you've got a midfielder dropping in, whether it was Casemiro or it was Eriksen. Quite often United made use of a midfielder rotating in there to play a pass into, and then would bounce the ball out to a fullback either side. And there was, at times as the game went on, United were a little bit more keen to drop these fullbacks a little bit deeper, almost to try and bait Saka and Martinelli to come and press even higher to create space in behind there between the Arsenal pressing players and the players at the back. So it was almost like, from an Arsenal perspective, there was a fear of pressing too high because Onana can cut through, but also when Arsenal did squeeze up in the mid-block, there was a little bit of an unwillingness from the defence to go with them. Now, part of that is because Ben White, in general, tends to jump really high. He tends to be one of the ones that supports the press, particularly if Ødegaard's sitting a bit deeper and Saka goes onto the centre-back. It'll be White who jumps to back him up there with the full-back. And what that means, what that leaves is then Rashford in the big space. And obviously you don't want to leave him with too much space, with too high of a line. So I think for that reason, the Arsenal back four wasn't squeezing up quite as much as they probably could have done. So what we actually ended up with for a large portion of the game was a really big disconnect between that Arsenal front unit and the back unit. So whether it was a back four or sometimes Rice and Havertz sitting a bit deeper and letting the front four go and press, that would be Nketiah and Ødegaard and Saka and Martinelli, what you ended up with was almost sort of two separate games happening within a game. So you had the own, sort of United's own third thing happening here. I'll stand out of the way so that you can actually see what's going on the screen, and Josh won't complain about me standing in the wrong place like an absolute disgrace and a cheat as usual. But yeah, what we ended up with was two games going on. So you've got this one game here, which is basically a 5v4 or sometimes a 6v4 if you've got one of the midfielders dropping in. And then you had the opposite in the other half, so a 4 versus 6 or a 5 versus 6 if one of the midfielders was staying a bit higher. And the problem for United was that there was nobody really to link the two. So United were able to keep the ball in this bit under not that much pressure from Arsenal, but there was nobody who was really able to drop in here and then, rather than just bouncing the ball off to the fullback out wide and hoping somebody would drop in there who wasn't under intense pressure, there was nobody who was able to receive the ball here, turn on it, and either play a forward pass between the lines to somebody dropping in, whether that's Martial, whether that's Anthony, whether that's not likely to be Rashford because he's not that great back to goal, although he has improved, or even Bruno. There was no one able to make those passes, nor was there anyone really dropping in unmarked because Rice and Havertz did a pretty good job in those situations. But the other option, if you can't play a pass to somebody dropping in, is that thing that United have been so desperately crying out for so long now, which is a ball-carrying midfielder. The one thing that would have sorted United out in this game in terms of making the ball come from our own third in the first phase into the final third there is somebody who can say, right, we're going to get on the half turn here, and rather than just bouncing that ball straight back, even though we're under pressure, we're going to just hold them off, brush off the player, turn and carry that ball forwards. Now, that man has been signed by Manchester United. That is the good news. Sofyan Amrabat has now been signed, and he can do that. That is one of his core skills. One of his best attributes is his ball carrying, his ability to turn on the ball and knit the sort of phases together. Knit it together from playing out from our own third to getting the ball into the final third. So that is some really good news for United, in that in the last two games, you've seen against Nottingham Forest that when the ball's in the final third, we've got sustained possession, Anthony looks good, Bruno looks good. Rashford looked better because he didn't really do too much, but the contributions he made were meaningful. He got an assist and he won the penalty. And you've seen that pretty much everyone looks good when we're high up the pitch. The counter press looks better as well because we've got players close to the ball. We're making short passes. And you've seen in the Arsenal game that we're good in the first phase as well because we've got players that can keep the ball. The problem, as it has been for a while at United now, is this midfield pivot, in that there isn't really a ball carrier. Casemiro is not the best on the half turn. Now, I must say, all of you guys in the comments, whether it's social media, whether it's in the YouTube comments down below, I'm sure you'll do it again today. Every week I get, why are you criticising Casemiro? Don't get me wrong, guys, I love Casemiro. Last season, I came on the Tactical View every week, outside Old Trafford when I was speaking to Flex after the game, pretty much every week, player ratings, whatever. I was gassing up Casemiro, gassing up Varane, all that sort of stuff. I have immense respect for what Casemiro has achieved as a player, everything he's done and his skill set. But this season, he's been nowhere near his best, and I think at his best, he offers us enough out of possession to be a really useful asset to the team. But if he's not performing at his best with the out of possession stuff, the stuff he offers us on the ball, quite simply, isn't good enough. He gave away lots of balls in possession, and at times as well, if you look in the build-up to that first Arsenal goal, it's actually between Casemiro and Antony. Antony goes and jumps and presses Gabriel when he probably shouldn't. Casemiro gets baited a little bit too high onto Havertz rather than covering the channel, which is something United did really well defensively for most of the game. So actually, you could argue between Antony and Casemiro, that's where the blame comes for that second goal. Look, I'm not slating Casemiro, but I think Amrabat, if he comes into this midfield straight away, it will be for Casemiro rather than for Eriksen, because at this moment in time, Casemiro is below his usual standards and not offering the team enough. I hope he gets back to his best because he's a great player, but at this moment in time, he has been very, very sloppy. Now, one sequence I want to illustrate with the impact of a ball-carrying midfielder is the one before United's goal. Now, there was a couple of transitions going on, but I think this is the only time really in the whole game when the cameraman actually showed what was going on the whole pitch rather than just this third where United were keeping the ball. So, cameraman, from a tactical point of view, you are a tactical view disgrace and a cheat, because you didn't show us what was going on. We couldn't see what was going on tactically. It was a mess. So this was the example we had to use. And you can see the ball breaks to Christian Eriksen here. And this is what United were crying out for, because the Arsenal team have been baited up the pitch to press. You've got Nketiah, you've got Saka, you've got Martinelli. That's three players, the wrong side of the ball. Look at their body language. They're not interested in tracking back. Odegaard's not really doing anything there to help. Presumably that's Havertz, Zinchenko maybe, or Rice. And I think that's Ben White there. But the point is, you've got three players there, 4, 5, 6, out of the game. And that's what happens if you play through the press and there's space to burst into. What United needed, as we said, to link that second phase, for that first phase to the final phase, the link in between, either somebody dropping in and we fizz a pass through the lines, which was tough because Rice and Havertz did a good job defensively, or you need someone with the legs, the engine, the ball carrying ability to break through the lines, and that came from an unlikely source. It came from a man who was previously has had heart issues, previously was not alive. So how he's found the energy within him to make that run, I will never know, given the performances he showed towards the end of last season. This is probably the most impressive part of the season for me so far, is the energy that Christian Eriksen had here to burst through the entire Arsenal midfield. So you start off with that, then you see this, he's out sprinted, whoever that is, we don't know, don't really care. And then what happens next is fantastic. So you see, we've got to highlight the other tactical things going on as well. So you've got Saliba here, gets completely drawn in by Martial. Martial's run there is actually really nice, looking to go that side because it attracts Saliba in as well as Gabriel. And because of that, you've got a big space there and a foot race between White and Rashford. Now, we mentioned earlier, White often likes to jump up to support Saka in the press. This is the downside of that. You get in a foot race to Rashford, and Eriksen plays a perfect pass here. He just releases the ball here as Havertz gets close to him, feeds it through that gap, and he has two choices really with the pass. Choice one, he can smash that pass, make sure it gets through, and Rashford probably ends up a bit wide on his left foot. Or choice two, you underhit it slightly, make sure Rashford has to cut in, but that's what he prefers to do. So that's the advantage of playing with a player where you know what he's going to do, and that enabled Rashford to then get in the box, get his shot off, and of course score past Ramsdale, who wasn't great, and I think will probably be replaced by David Raya pretty quickly. So the final sort of image of the sequence is here. Rashford's on the ball. And the rest, once again, is history because it's Rashford against Ben White, and we know what happens in those situations. So, in terms of United in possession, that is pretty much it. So what you've seen so far from this show is that United were pretty good in the first phase, and in the previous show against Notts Forest, pretty good in the final phase, high up the pitch. It's just that missing link in between. Now, before we finish the show, one thing I do need to talk about is defensively how United defended against Arsenal, because they are a tough team to play against, and I've got to give a bit of credit to a few players in particular, the wingers. Now, as we know, Arsenal like to build this front five when they're attacking to outnumber the opposition's back lines. You've got Saka and Martinelli holding the width, and Nketiah between the strikers, Odegaard, Havertz in the half spaces there. If I'm speeding up a little bit, it's because I do want to get this finished without being a disgrace and a cheat and keeping you all here for 2 hours. So apologies for that. But yeah, we see the Arsenal team stepping up the pitch. You get Zinchenko there, as we talked about with Rice's angle biases. He prefers to be on this side. But what I really liked was that in previous games against Arsenal, one thing that United have struggled with is the combinations, particularly, Saliba should be number 2, that needs changing, particularly on this right-hand side here with Ben White, Saka and Odegaard. Now, the way that United defended this in this particular game was really, really good. We've got 2 Bulls on the pitch, so we can't restart play, but I might get a yellow card. That's how it's been going this season in some instances, so let me know. Am I booked, red carded, time wasting, disgrace and a cheat, whatever you want to say. But as Arsenal move the ball out here to this side, the point is, when they switch the play, United have to defend nice and narrow, so the ball starts out on one side, United shift across, shift across, shift across, like so, and as they switch the ball to the far side, the fullback jumps out here to go and press the winger. Now what that leaves is a massive gap here, which has previously been exploited really well in these games by Arsenal because the United wingers haven't really tracked back. What United did really, really well here was that whether it was Casemiro on this side or whether it was Eriksen on this side, they always filled in this gap between the fullback and the centre-back there. Now, the second problem that United have had in these sorts of situations is the space that then opens up inside, because Saka and Martinelli both want to cut back in there, and without somebody filling in this space, there's a big gap. That's where Saka scored from last season, and Rashford did a really good job there on the left side of filling in that space there. So I really like that from Rashford. It was really strong from our defensive game plan. And for me, it shows that the team is behind Erik ten Hag because they were prepared to work hard out of possession, particularly Marcus Rashford. It didn't last for the full game, and that gives me, again, a few question marks about fitness, which has been an issue all season so far. Again, the injuries aren't looking great. I think pre-season may have had something to do with it because obviously in the US, there tends to be a lot of artificial pitches which put more load on the players. Again, then you can't use them for as many minutes. And if you're having those situations, you can't build up fitness. You can't always build up the injury resistance you need. So I think that's part of it, but generally fitness seems to be an issue. But for the first half or the first 60 minutes, Rashford did well tracking back. And it was the same thing on the other side with Antony filling in here when that gap opened up if Wan-Bissaka went out to Martinelli and Casemiro covered that gap there. The one time United didn't do it was Arsenal's first goal, and if you watch that back you can see Antony gets baited to go and press Gabriel when he probably shouldn't. Casemiro is dealing with, I think, potentially Kai Havertz there rather than covering the gap there, and that's where the runner comes from. I think it's maybe Rice, and that's where the issue comes up. But overall, this was a much improved performance in a big game from Manchester United. So, having seen this, having seen the full tactical view breakdown, please do let me know, are you still thinking it's another shocking result from United? Are you really still Erik ten Hag out if you were before watching the show? I think that's ridiculous. Are you still Andre Onana out if you were? Are you, I don't know, Jadon Sancho out? Or are you actually seeing that there is genuine progress? United are going in the right direction. And for the first time in a while, there is actually hope that we're on the right path to sustainable growth and sustainably becoming one of the best teams in the league and actually able to compete against the big teams away from home as well as at Old Trafford. Hope you've enjoyed watching the show, and we'll see you again very soon for a special tactical view player profile on Sofyan Amrabat, as we've mentioned today, but also the debutant against Arsenal, Rasmus Højlund. Until next time, peace.